Hello, welcome to my first analysis video for the PMPL South Asia Season 4 Week 1, Day 1. It's my first time doing a video like this, so apologies if I kind of suck, if I'm actually bad at explaining things, which is most likely going to be the case. But the aim of this kind of video is just to pick moments of games that stood out in either a good or a bad way for me and to essentially talk about them and to give my perspective on what happened and how the teams could have done better or how they did really an excellent job in those moments. So I'm going to look to try and do these somewhat on a daily basis. If I'm very busy, there's a chance I might not be able to, but at the end of the day, I'm going to do my best. If you have any feedback, feel free to let me know. But without further ado, let's get into the thick of the action. Okay, so the first moment of the game I want to break down is around 10 minutes in on Phase 2. You'd seen Phase 1 and Phase 2 were pretty central across the board, and it really wasn't too frustrating for a lot of the teams, even though the playing path was kind of on the west, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But the first two circle shifts have been very calm, nothing really crazy. So that should tell you that within the first couple of phases, especially from the first to the second, a lot of teams had rotated and were going to be holding on to the positions that they were in. There was going to be not really too much change around the circle. And what I noticed straight away is that Zeus were kind of sending it in kind of late. And instead of stopping to get more information, instead of rotating completely together, you can see right now on the minimap, you have Zeus in front, which isn't really a bad thing when kind of one is pushing on their own. That's really not the worst thing in the world. But then you have two behind, and there's two teams surrounding them, by the way, 7Cs and I believe Raw, if I'm not mistaken, or it's Vibes. And you see straight away, shots from 7Cs, A1 come in, get a knock on the Zeus, who had gone further ahead, and that's all because of a lack of information. And you see it happening again where IC is trying to react to it, and that's all well and good. It was Raw, actually, that were up on the hill there. And then Godless gets knocked by Dante, as it happens, right? But you had three teams shooting at them, and all of that is simply down to not stopping, not scouting, and it's a bit of an amateur mistake, and a lot of teams shouldn't be making those kind of mistakes. It's a simple one to point out, but I thought it was an important one because you kind of got to get the Rule 101 and the Rule 102s down to a T first. Zeus are a very experienced team. I was surprised to see them make that mistake, but they did. I have to point it out. The next clip I want to talk about is the fight between I8 and Pablo. Now, I know a lot of people would probably be expecting me to talk about this. It was initially very good from I8. You can see right now, Blade is outside of the dip. You have Refuse and Uzum on the outside, and Crypto is going for a flank. It's a really great blanket strategy from I8. Honestly, cannot fault it to a T. Plus, it's Phase 4. It's maybe a little bit late into the circle, you could argue, where they can get third partied, and you see that kind of happen. But I credit them. I credit them for the strength to kind of, to pull it off and to really spread themselves out, not commit too much to a dip. On Bablu's side, having Danny on the backline is definitely not a bad thing, but you can see they are definitely far more pinched inside those holes. Blade throws out an nade, gets a straight up knock on the Zeban, which is great. That shouldn't really stop I8 from slowing down. If anything, it should promote them to move forward. You see Uzum moves out of the dip, throws another nade, Crypto's on the flank, and he should be pushing a little bit more aggressive towards maybe that tree to get some information. Now, here's where the mistakes happen for I8. Instead of both Blade and Refuse pretty much sending it into the dip, Instead of sending it into the dip, they stop by the hay bale. So they basically half push it. They don't completely push it, they half push it. It's as bad as being in the dip. You gotta commit to that. Uzum gets tagged up, but Danny also gets tagged up in return. This is where the third party does come into play. Killer gets a knock into Uzum. And that is also a product of the fact that they halved it. They didn't full send it. It's blue zone of phase 4. You gotta know there's teams around you. Just full send it into the dip. You may be going in a little bit blind, but at least there's a much bigger chance that they aren't going to get third party. So it's at that point they kind of panic. They panic. IA panic. Blade. He cooks up another nade. You have Crypto flanking in, pushing a little bit more forward, which is definitely not a bad thing. Crypto's still in a good spot. And Blade gets another knock on the Zibayan. That's, again, it's a good recovery. I mentioned about panicking, but it's still a good recovery. Reviews is going for the revive, onto Uzum, which is good. And Blade is doing a great job, and Crypto, like I said, in from behind, that flank is working for I8. Great. Wolf gets knocked down, but this is where Blade makes first of 3 vital mistakes from I8. 1, his teammate is still technically being revived. Crypto has the angle, so if Pablo, if 420 boy pushes on up, you know, Crypto has him from behind. His teammate's getting revived. There's no need for Blade to push this, right? More of his body is exposed in this situation, right? He goes for the shots, misses him, gets turned, gets knocked by 420 boy. Now, that's recoverable. That is recoverable, because at this stage, Uzum is revived up. He's healing up, okay? Now, Crypto is right to not push in. He's absolutely dead right to not push in. But then, Refuse, before his teammate Uzum is healed up, he pushes in on a vehicle on his own, gets turned on by 420 boy, who doesn't really have the full information, is too focused on Danny. Crypto gets tagged up, so he's forced to back off. He can't support Uzum in any way, shape, or form. And then Uzum pushes in without any information and gets taken out by 420 boy. Like, that IA play of going in one by one, that was the ultimate panic, and that's what lost them that team fight. There's no way that Pablo should have realistically have won that. It was great composure by 420 boy. Great teamwork by Danny, but that was a big throw from IA. I see a lot of potential in how they play, but that was a massive F that they will need to greatly learn from. That mistake shouldn't be happening in PMPL level. The next moment I want to highlight is the one where DRS crashed onto the wall of the Yasnaya buildings, right? It was a full sender crash. Now, one of their players did get knocked, but when I play, one thing you'll notice, and instead of like a lot of players do and a lot of teams do, they'll kind of stop at the wall and they won't move, and they'll kind of go, okay, we're safe right now, oh yeah, that's fine. And being out the side of the wall, it's hard cover, but it's really at massive risk of a nice juicy nade. But instead you will see a few seconds later, when you get an overview, look at that. Galzen brings his teammate away from the rest of his team, spreads out to go for the revive, because they know there's an onslaught of nades coming. AJ's on the other side. You don't stay huddled like that. So that was a really good play from DRS. They get the revive off, and then what that allows them to do is it allows them to set themselves up to overtake that building that Action holds onto with Ayush on his own. So that play by DRS in that moment was realistically what gave them a massive advantage and probably the game overall. It was really well executed by DRS. So for my first point of game 3 for today, it's a small one, but I felt like it was important to mention. We have a situation where I believe Pian Crew have rotated down from Severny to the northern edge of Rosshawk, which is a great spot to rotate to based on how the circles have been. Deadeye's guys, I believe, have been here from the start, if I'm not mistaken. But it's more on Deadeye's position that I find not the strongest. It's not a bad position to be in, because you have a really nice spread across that kind of northern side of Roshawk. But what I would argue with that is it's not very forward thinking. It's not very phase 3, phase 4 thinking. When I was talking with T-God in VC, Temka, he mentioned about having maybe 3 of the players on the very eastern edge of Roshawk. I was thinking that on the southern side of Roshawk, both of those areas, to me, are much better than on the northern side of Roshawk. Unless they were going for the actual engagement. As it happens, they didn't, and they did move away as far as I know. But to me, there has to be a bit more purpose behind why you position yourself. Even though it's only 11 minutes in, it can make a big difference. The blue zone of phase 2 is closing in. You want to start to get a little bit of information, or you want to have already set yourself up to prepare for the next phase. It's not much, but I think for other teams, it can make a bit of a difference. For my next point, it's to highlight Paradox, the Australian representatives for the PMPL South Asia. I really love this split that they have on the compound to the west of Headshot Hills. As I play, you can see it right now. It doesn't look super clear, but as I bring it on and I play, you can see as Pablo x Clarity Esports come into the scene. Hazard is in the open, away, but the rest of his team, you can see with the arrows behind, are covering him really well. So Hazard is doing a great job out in the open, creating an automatic bigger spread and making it harder for a team to breach onto the area, because the compound Paradox holds onto is great for in the moment, and it can be beneficial for the next circle shift. But the more space they have around them, the easier it's going to be on the next circle shift. So that's why Hazard is in that position. And as I play, you'll see he does catch one of the Pablo players out really well, because they have no idea. And it's because he's prone down. That is the benefit of TPP, of course, is that you are able to prone down and play technically a little bit safer while still grabbing information on a team that comes in later. And you'll see as he looks around, the arrows of his teammates are covering multiple angles, being aware of what's going on around them. Turns around, hears the footsteps of a player going close by. He probably hears the footsteps of both players. You don't see it. I believe because of hardcore mode, you don't see the footsteps, but you hear it. So the audio cue is so important. You see it come up pretty quickly. He can hear one set of footsteps moving away. So that's why he stays in the direction of where he hears the footsteps. Once again, keeping an eye. This is fantastic awareness and audio control by Hazard. It's really undervalued. Takes a step back, sees it. He waits. See, that moment of waiting, that little bit of trigger discipline is the reason why he stood up, got the knock, confirmation. Fantastic from Hazard. I cannot compliment that any more highly, because what that does is that automatically says to 420 boy, yeah, okay, screw this, I'm out of here. We'll just avoid that. Automatic more control for Paradox. So A1 for Hazard and for Paradox completely. Great IGL decision, great individual play. Now, this next bit is really a big product of teams not taking in engagement early enough, which is why I'm a really big fan of the timing of a rotation being a big impact on what can be a late game result for a team. Zeus rock up onto Seal's position on the 16-minute mark, right? And to give them credit, Icy does push forward across the way. Baron doesn't get the knock. Okay. And so give credit initially to Icy. That nade doesn't quite go in the building. He doesn't heal up. He prioritizes. But Baron makes the massive mistake of getting in the buggy and trying to drive away. As if, really, mate? Really? So that was a mistake from Baron. But the bigger mistake that Zeus make is that they've taken down one player. And there's no response from the rest of the team, realistically. Yes, Icy hasn't first aided up, but there should be an automatic push from at least 2 more of the Zeus players. Because when I fast forward to the 90-minute mark of the game, okay, there you go. To the 90-minute mark of the game, the circle has shifted away from both of these teams, okay? You're gone into the next phase, the circle has shifted away. Now, finally, Zeus start to engage, which is great. They overall win the engage, etc. Wally does get a kill onto Zeus, I believe. So it does put them down to 2 players, which again is a product of them taking too long to really engage. You're talking 3 minutes after they got the first kill on the Seal. Killer's the last one standing. He tries to go for the drop shot. It doesn't work out. He gets taken out. But what this does is, 1, Phase 5 has shifted. They're away from the circle. 2, the teams that are closer to the edge of the circle, I forget who it is exactly, is looking straight towards Zeus because they hear the commotion behind them. And often when you're on the edge of the circle on Phase 4 onwards, Phase 5 onwards, you're nearly better off kind of having a look at the teams behind you because you can pick those teams off. But Zeus are left in a position where all well and good, they have 3 players up, but now they're running out of time. It's Pablo X Clarity that's looking at them. And okay, they're not in the circle, but they're much closer to the edge than Zeus. Zeus know they're running out of time. They have to make a panic move. And if I just go by a couple of seconds, they make a real desperate attempt to push into the circle. Okay. They do find a bit of a position. But as quick as you know, they've 1 player picked off. Godless is struggling. Abley is struggling. A minute and a half later to 2 minutes later, they're getting pushed upon by, I think S9. And S9 take them out. And that was all a product of the fact that Zeus, to begin with, took 3 minutes to engage onto Seal. Whereas if they had taken down Seal within the 17-minute mark, they would have had 2 extra minutes to plan where they wanted to go, to do a bit more scouting, and I guarantee you, they would have lasted a lot longer. So that, I really wanted to highlight that point. This next clip is to do with I8. They were coming up from, they had held on to the kind of northeastern edge of, or the northwestern edge of Pachinki, so they were looking to enter via the church side area. I'm not sure what exact information they had, but I'm pretty sure they were aware of a team either side. The classic mistake they made is they didn't commit to one side of the church only. They tried to kind of go into the church in the middle and hoping they'd survive. Whereas R3D kind of had their number from one side and Whizzle had them on the other side. Now, it was really difficult for I8, and credit to them for trying to deal with it for so long. But Uzzum makes a dash. He does get to the side of the church. Another nade goes out, and a knock comes in, right? Delta knocks down Uzzum. Whereas if they had committed to one side, I'm not saying they would have survived for much longer, but it would have allowed them to focus a lot more directly onto one team only. If they had gone to the left, R3D wouldn't have third partied. And if they had gone to the right, Whizzle wouldn't have third partied. So that kind of focus on one side and commit to it is you know, a lot more valuable, and there's a much bigger chance you're going to at least secure 1 to 2 kills out of it. The nades are flying. Uzzum trying to be revived up by Refused, or they know that time is running out because Phase 6 Blue Zone is closing in. They realize they kind of have to make a bit of a push, but at this stage they're struggling. They're doing what they can. Luckily, R3D are under their own pressure, but they do still have the players up. Anubis to focus. That gets a knock onto Uzum. He'll be able to turn around, move in. They'll be able to focus on IA, and IA end up getting drowned. Whereas, if they had a focus on R3D's position, because R3D had Joker knocked down, R3D had way more space to play with. They were under a lot less pressure. So, you know, you're better off to commit to one side and hope for the absolute best. Focus on one team at a time. These final couple of moments are great for a couple of teams. S9, they know they're kind of bunched into a bit of a corner, a little bit of rock coverage outside of the compound that Future Station are holding on to. They do, for the most part, have Future Station's number, but I guarantee you their thinking is, well, we're fine for this phase, but what about the next? What about the other teams around us? So this is where Inky initially does a great job of sending himself out to the next rock. It's really valuable because he has a different kind of angle on the warehouse while also covering a bit more to the left. Essentially a more controlling spread for the rest of his team. But as I fast forward and Vibes do what they can to get across the road, throwing those offensive smokes and defensive smokes, I'll bring it on forward. The mistake Inky makes is that when he's snaking from the rock here that he was in to try to get onto there, not only is it too late overall, but two, he's snaking. It's way too slow. If you're going to make that kind of move, you got to stand up and you got to push it. Yes, your footsteps are being heard, but you're out in the open. You're a sitting duck. And you'll see Inky gets absolutely clustered. There you go. I'll go back. Killer spots him up. Gets knocking. There's absolutely zero response from Inky because he's prone down. It's just, you know, he's out in the open. So, if he had to pull that off earlier, and two, if he had have moved, he might not have survived. But I guarantee you there would have been a much higher chance that he would have gotten the kill on the killer. And then just a kind of final moment, and I have to highlight this. Prabin was the man of the hour in this final fight between the three teams. Common sense tells you that, like, he got the revive on the assassin instantly. Using the TPP perspective, he starts to cook up a nade. Because sometimes PUBG Mobile is a matter of simple equations, right? 2 + 2 = 4. If this area is covered and this area has a couple of smokes, there's a pretty big chance that there's a team there. You could add it up and you can get a pretty good evaluation when you're IGL and when your team is pretty finely tuned. It's easier said than done, but it is sometimes simpler than you think. Prabin, he cooks up a nade. Instant turnaround for Prabin. It is so beautifully cooked. An instant double knockdown, and that shuts Future Station down big time. Instant double knock. Now, he doesn't exactly know who it's on, but he might know with the confirmation. There you go. So that confirmation, that will be known to him. Okay, that's 2 players of Future Station. Killer has gotten 1 kill onto one of the S9 players. We've got one either side. But that double kill is so important because that shuts down freestyle. It allows Vibes to take control, take over, and then they close the game out. But that moment from Prabin was big time, and he was even integral to them actually closing out the game. So, well done to Vibes in that last moments, and that nade was glorious. Something real quick that I did want to compliment I8 on, because obviously they've had a lot of mistakes today, but just one little thing that I was very happy with how they played was them sweeping and covering behind. The last player of T2K couldn't really do much, but I just thought I8 in these moments did a great job of sweeping through the edge of the blue zone into the circle. Not perfect by all means, but compared to how they, throughout the rest of the games today, I think that was a positive note from I8. It's not much, but I did want to throw it out there. So I just want to talk for this next thing. I want to talk real quick about DRS and what was the setup for the game-winning moment from them. This is on phase 6, 22.5 minutes in. They do lose Guy Alzen. Great play by Stalwart Esports, of course. Now, when DRS lost a player, instead of maybe panicking and sending the rest of the team into the same place, they do send Nima closer, right? So Nima is now there to support Mafia Ninja. So 2 players together. When I fast forward though, you're wondering, well, where's AJ? What's he doing? Well, AJ has a crafty play in mind. With full confidence, with full info from the rest of his team, what does he do? He sets himself on a second angle to the southeastern edge of the circle. This position by AJ is absolutely perfect. It's a little bit risky, but it's absolutely perfect. There's never 100% security that Mafia Ninja and Nima are going to get the absolute, squad up onto Stalwart. A little bit of help from Deadeye's guys definitely benefited them in that moment. But just that position by AJ is instrumental to them taking the game and coming out on top. Because you can see as you get through the game, when you have a look at AJ's position, he stays there. Like, he absolutely stays there. Because not only does phase 7 head in his direction, which is definitely a little bit of luck, but what that allows is that allows the rest of his team to back off a little bit. AJ is able to get some third-party information on where the players of Seal are, and that gives them the element of advantage. Now, I want to give also a quick shout-out to Seal with Killer going across the road like that. That was ballsy, but similar to AJ, what that allowed is that allowed the rest of his team in the back line to be the aggressors as well and to help take down Deadeye's guys. So it was great from the last 2 teams of Seal and DRS, but specifically AJ. Such good play from AJ specifically and DRS. The first clip from the final game of the day is the fight between Deadeye's guys and High Voltage. Now, I personally didn't like how Deadeye's guys had kind of committed themselves to the edge of Yasnaya on phase 1 and then phase 2 shifted down south. But the way they reacted to it was overall really good. Especially on this engagement. So they came over the Yasnaya fields for the most part. And I don't think they knew that High Voltage were there, because if you look at Fragster, he's kind of driving around to do some scouting. Extreme takes a couple of shots, doesn't really connect on the frag, but what I love about that is the reaction of the rest of Deadeye's guys, right? It's like there's purpose to their movement, which I will always compliment them on. Purpose to their movement. So Rated Sir kind of goes around to the side of the building. Now, this is bad from High Voltage because there's no real response from him, right? There's no real team response outside of Extreme. Extreme does a good job of trying to hold him back, but he's on his own. Whereas the rest of Extreme, yeah, Ozzy's in the back line. That's not ideal, but it's okay. He can't really do anything, and then Cloud is too late overall to respond. He does get a knock on the frag, but it's not enough for the time being. And now, Deadeye's guys do a great job of keeping one in the back on top of the hill. It's a fantastic hill to continue to lay pressure on the team around you. But again, where's the rest of the High Voltage guys? Unfortunately, nowhere really, because they kind of lost a player, I believe, and yeah. Like, because High Voltage had lost one player early on, if you're going to hold on to Alamo, you better do it as a full squad, i.e. a 3-man team. You can't do it as a 2-man team. You're asking for trouble. Cloud gets a knock. He's going to get counter-knocked. There's nothing in return from Ozzy. Ozzy has nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. He ends up getting taken out. But I do want to compliment Deadeye's guys on just the aggressiveness and the forward thinking of that engagement. There was a little bit of risk involved to it, of course, because they hadn't done maybe the relevant scouting that could be ideal. But when you're talking about taking the risks in phase 2, where you're less chance to get third party, to me, very good Dead Eyes, guys. Now, this fight between Stalwart and S9 is both good and bad. Stalwart do a pretty decent job of kind of engaging via utility either side, but after getting an initial knock and confirming that kill on the Monk, there should have been a lot more aggression from Stalwart. They knew that they had the body advantage. You could easily send one player to the hay bale here. You could have kind of one pushing a bit more. They even had one driver driving in a vehicle that could have driven a bit more to the flank. My point is, they should have been a lot more aggressive on this engagement. They allowed Seal9 to stay alive for pretty much 2 to 3 minutes longer than they should have, and it affects them on phase 5. Yes, okay, they're by this point they are a little bit distracted by I believe it's T2K, if I'm not mistaken, or is it's R3D, sorry, R3D that they're distracted by, but they know that S9 are still there. And they aren't really engaging on it fully. Not really engaging on it fully. They back off. Maybe they back off because they think, okay, well, now we've alerted too many teams around us. There's not enough attention. But I suppose a little bit similar to what we saw between I8 and Pablo in game 1. Just commit to pushing the dip. Don't use so much utility and kind of half-arse it, right? Look to be controlling and aggressive. Luckily, Seal9 don't get any counter knocks, but I did want to highlight that because I think Stalwart could have been a lot more aggressive onto Seal9 and taken them out quicker. The last clip of the day that I want to talk about is this fight between Whizzle's Vibes and Raw. Whizzle Vibes should know that this is a 4v3. They should know. And initially, they have a pretty good setup. The road's in the middle, so it is quite tricky. But what I love about Whizzle Vibes is they have one player on the outside of the circle. Right? On that north side. Great! They should have either kept them there or actually looked to move them across the road. But they don't do that. What happens is, as phase 7 blue zone is starting to close in, fast forward a little bit, gets in his vehicle. He has a vehicle and he doesn't drive across the road. Never mind walking across the road. There's no real kind of aggressive coordination from his whole team. There's too much presumption on the next circle going in their favor. Again, they should know at this stage as the game has gone on that it's down to them and one other team. 4v3, they have the body advantage. But because Roots joins up with Reaper, Bot and Malik, that really takes a massive level of control out of the circle for them. At this point, Blah 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 has crawled up to the shack and he now has control of the shack. Whizzle's Vibes did not look to send someone over to the shack to try and get information, keep it in their control, have that little bit of an anchor point, take a risk. Lost it, it's still down to 3v3. At least you know where they are. But they're relying too much on the TPP. They're relying too much on the circle. At this stage, they have one player on the outside. That's all well and good. It's now on the other side, Delta. But again, he's not really taking a chance. There's a burnt up vehicle there. He doesn't look to head towards it. There's absolutely no smokes from Whizzle's Vibes. No smokes at all. Nothing from Whizzle Vibes on the blue zone of phase 7. Just not proactive enough. Now suddenly they start to throw the smokes out. They do. One there. they kind of start to think, okay, phase 7 is about to go into phase 8. What do we do? Throw a couple of utility. Phase 8 pops up. It shifts away from them. Now Wizzles are screwed because they've taken too long. There's no smokes. There's no utility. Raw know exactly where they are. Raw have overall control despite not having the body advantage. Simply because there's been absolutely no smokes up until that point. There's been no, well, where are they going to come from? Whereas, because he left it so late, when the smokes were thrown out, Raw knew a lot more information about the location of the Wizzle players than Wizzle knew about the Raw players. It's really kind of standard stuff, and you can see all the smokes and blah blah blah. He's looking around, he's cooking up a pre-nade, thinking, okay, well, the smokes are going out, they're gonna start to make a move. 20 seconds until the blue zone starts closing in. It does disperse and slow down Wizzles a little bit. Now, those amount of smokes are all well and good, but they're a little bit all over the place. I do like the offensive ones there, but if you're throwing offensive smokes there, to be honest, you should be sending 2 players in that direction, right? Because you have the edge of the smoke here. You can peek out on the edge. That's a bit of a distraction point. It's going to slow down where Joker is, and you have 2 players pushing on that one side, maybe 3. Whereas they don't do that. Malik hesitates. Is he going across the road? Is he not going across the road? What are you doing? He does make it across the road. Reaper Bot tries to take advantage of that smoke there, which is definitely not a bad thing along with Razor and Malik. But again, Delta, although he's taking damage, he should still be pushing forward. Again, it's 4v3. You can afford to have that sacrificial lamb. You can afford to have that trade, and they initially do get the knock. But blah 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 isn't spotted. Joker isn't spotted. He gets actually a lovely... Actually, sorry, Joker's knocked down. My apologies. It's blah, blah, blah that gets a knock nade onto Delta because Delta hesitated. He then turned around, got a knock on the Reaper Bot, uses a Shack, and the Shack is really the biggest reason why Raw win this game is because they control the Shack. Now it's just basically 2v1 in the favor of Raw, and Raw win. Simply because Wizzles took too long to throw smokes, to move across the road, and they relied too much on the phase 8 circle shift. It was a great game by Wizzles with vibes, but it just wasn't executed in the way they could have. Okay, so that was an analysis video for day 1. I don't know how long it's going to be. I have a feeling it's going to be quite long, and I hope it's somewhat entertaining. If you have any feedback, again, please feel free to let me know. I enjoyed kind of taking notes, and I enjoyed recording this, and I hope I enjoy kind of editing it and putting it out there. This is a new thing for me. Stay safe, stay awesome. I'll see you hopefully tomorrow for another day of PMPL South Asia action.